No, I understand the perspective of like controlling the message you want to put out there. That makes a lot of sense, and I think it's a good idea to have official social media channels for the project rather than just letting everything be like whatever people happen to find. But the issue is then you need people to be very plugged into the project to know about those channels even existing, let alone the campaigns going on those channels.
And that's exactly what we saw, is that the people who were plugged in were the people who had the opportunity to donate, and a lot of other people weren't.
Yeah.
I think maybe that's a notable thing about the media landscape today, is that we don't live in a world where everybody's paying attention to the same sources, right? People have their own personal, private little thing that they look at, and
Right.
that's the most important source of information for them. And we've got to be in all those places so that we can see all those eyeballs.
Mhm.
And thereby be contributing to the problem of attention overload and people having everything all over the place. But I don't know, that's the world we live in.
Yeah, well, look, you can try to fight it personally, but you're not going to fight it on a large scale.
I mean, they say it's an attention economy, right? That like everybody is competing not so much for your money, but for your attention too. And we're doing the same thing in KDE. When we put information out there, we want you to take 30 seconds or a minute or two out of your day to read and consume that information and have some kind of reaction to it. And those are seconds or minutes that you cannot spend doing something else.
Mhm.
So, yep, we're guilty. Everybody's guilty.
Now, what do you think about how would I say it? It maybe not the greatest of fundraising in terms of raw income, but I feel like it would have a lot more goodwill, and that's like the idea of merchandise. I've seen like ideas for like a plushie of the mascot. I'm quite a fan of that one. People will talk about things like shirts and things like that. Obviously, these have a relatively low profit margin if you're selling them at a point where people can legitimately afford them. But I think people like the idea of I have a physical thing, and it's like it's just cool to have. People will talk about how Red Hat employees can buy red hats, for example.
Uh-huh.
I think they sell
So
them
I'm
at
going
a
to
discount or
the
something.
most KDE answer to this, which is, did you know we already do this? Probably not.
No idea.
The
What? Where can I find it? What do you
We have
have?
like a Cafe Press website that's set up for KDE. Oh gosh, where is it? Yeah, Cafe. I'll find it for you. Um,
Is there even a link on the case?
yeah, it's like super hidden. Like the fact that you don't know about it and I can like not even find it is definitely a symptom of the problem here. But we do technically have a
Oh wait,
KDE
wait.
Cafe Press where you can buy KDE branded merchandise. And clearly we need to do a much better job of announcing this and surfacing it in public, because I agree with you. People love stuff. Something that we do is we often will buy like a stack of t-shirts and bring them to an event that we're attending with a formal KDE booth. And every single time we've done this, we sell out of t-shirts like immediately. Every time we do this, we try to like increase the number of t-shirts that we bring. And so far, we've never had, I believe, bring any back. So yeah, like very, very, very good, very important.
I think just a basic change that
cafepress.com.
can be done on the donate page. There's already that like meta store page. Just put a link to that on the donate page. I think just that by itself would be a giant improvement.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So I'm gonna like go do that right after we get off here. But yeah, it's the cafepress.com/shop/KDE right there. We should totally do that. That's like the obvious
Okay.
thing. So clearly there's low-hanging fruit. Like
Sure.
we talked
Yeah.
about the donation notification being low-hanging fruit. I still think that was low-hanging fruit. This is another example of low-hanging fruit. So we're like so bad about asking for money. We're just kind of dipping our toes, I think psychologically, into the idea that what we do has economic value
Right.
and needs to be sustained through money to make it economically sustainable, and that we should not be timid about expressing that, right? Like this is kind of a new thing. I think none of us in the free software movement are terribly motivated by money, or else we would be making missile guidance systems
Right.
instead. And so we kind of have to get used to this. We have to get used to the idea that it's okay to use the M word and talk about money and sell things and ask for donations and things like that. So yeah, definitely we'll put the merch link somewhere else. A lot of this stuff is like super out of date too. We could make better use of this. I see there's like old logos. We should totally have a Conky plushie. We should have a bunch of Conky plushies.
Yeah, okay, thank you. You're someone okay that agrees with me here. Here's the link that I'm talking about. This was proposed.
Who doesn't want Conky plushies? Come on.
I've heard people say it's not going to be a great. It's like, you know, it's not a great venue for making money. There's not going to be that much profit to it. Like yeah, sure, absolutely, but like that would be so cool to have though. And it's been a thing that has been done in the past apparently.
Yeah, I agree that probably it wouldn't even call it profit margin because KDE EV is a nonprofit.
Sure.
We do not make
revenue stream, whatever you want to call it.
The way this would have to work is we would partner with a third party company, and they would have to agree to donate, some percentage of sales to us, so that it technically is a donation and not a profit gathering thing. But I think the value of this sort of thing is sort of beyond the economics of it, because if you're getting more KDE swag out there, more people get exposed to it. And they see, what is this weird K thing? What is this strange green dragon? What is this weird white clock that says community design on it? I feel like I'm seeing this everywhere. What's going on? And then that can lead them to experiencing KDE as an organization and our software. And so it's the sort of thing that pays dividends over time. You don't measure it in terms of, this made us 12 million euros today, right? It's not what it's going to be. You measure it in terms of exposure and goodwill over time.
Right. Community excitement, getting more people.
It's possible. You can't connect A to B. You can't say, oh, the Conky plushie is the thing that, because we did this 5 years ago, has led to this big success that we had today. Like, nobody can measure that. You have to just kind of have faith in it.
Right. And being able to buy merchandise like this, being able to like see, like, shirts are cool, sure, but like, I don't know, I'm personally a fan of plushies, and it's something we can just say, oh, I have this thing, and you kind of like feel more invested in the project, and maybe you're not going to be like, top contributor in the project. Maybe you want to talk more about KDE. Maybe you are more invested in, if you find a bug, you'll report it because you've got this thing where you're like, oh, I feel like I'm a part of it. I have this thing that like reminds me of the project.
Yeah, I agree. And people love having that kind of stuff in their house, right? People buy branded mugs and t-shirts and plushies of like their favorite TV shows, their favorite video games, or favorite sports team. Everybody loves this stuff. It becomes a part of your identity.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like this, I think you make a good point about free software and, like, a lot of people being kind of weird about money. You'll occasionally see this idea, and it's not from developers, which makes sense because, the developers are actually the ones writing stuff, but you'll see this idea sometimes where people get confused about the idea of free software. They're like, oh, why would I pay for free software? It's free software. Like, I mentioned that I think the term free software is just a bad term, and it should have been Libre software from the very start.
Yeah,
and we wouldn't have had this issue.
English, right? Like, we have the word free, and it is a highly overloaded term. Most other languages, like in French, you have libre and gratuit, and they have different concepts. German has the same thing. In English, we're stuck with free, and libre is like this awkward term that most people don't know. But I think the awkwardness is sort of understandable, though, because if you're giving away the code for free, it's really easy for anybody to compile that into a binary and then give that away for free, thereby undercutting anybody who wants to sell it. So there's kind of an inherent pressure towards zero there.
Right.
Like in mobile games, it's the same thing. I remember when the iOS App Store came out and people started experimenting with selling apps for like $10, $5. And within a couple of years, the competitive pressure has driven everything down to being zero and ad supported.
Yeah.
And in free software, I think it's the same way, because if some huckster says, hey, I'm compiling the software and I'm going to sell it, anybody else can say, well, I'm going to undercut you and sell it for less. And I'm going to give it away for free because I'm morally offended by you attempting to monetize other people's work, and so on and so forth. So it's not that weird, in my opinion, that people don't want to pay for it. I think that's a big advantage, is that you don't have to pay for it. From the user perspective, is that you get this for free. I think the challenge there is understanding what you are doing.
Right.
Because if your attitude is, I'm getting this for free, therefore I'm getting one over on the idiot who buys his software, you're kind of not having the right attitude. Because let's face it, when you get open source software for free, you do have to put up with a certain amount of slowness and development speed. You have to put up with being the QA person on occasion. If you have a bug, you have to report it. And you may need to talk to crotchety bug triagers and developers, and not people who get electrocuted by their pointy-haired boss if they're not chipper enough when they talk in your support ticket, right? Like, you have to pay to a certain extent with your time. And if you don't, if you wind up in a piece of open source software that's like so amazing that it's better, then you found like the Garden of Eden. And I personally think that KDE is pretty darn close to this. And we have software that is so good, and it's free, and it's very stable, and it's not problematic. I think it's one of the things that drives people to us. But in general, in open source, I think you have to be emotionally prepared to deal with something, right? If you're not paying and you're not the customer, because we're not exploiting you with ads and telemetry, like, what's the catch, right? We like to say there's no catch, but sometimes there is a catch. And sometimes the catch is, it might be buggy.
Yeah.
It might take longer for new features to be developed. The UI might look a little bit like it was made by programmers in 1990.
Or have 4 different UI frameworks for the same the same project.
Yeah. And I know that this is something that KDE has been accused of in the past, but we've made a huge difference to make our UIs look like they at least came from 2002.
Well, they look consistent, but it's just what has had to be done behind the scenes to make them consistent. And the fact that there are multiple approaches to designing UIs that are all used at the same time.
Well, and KDE is very anarchic too, so it's almost impossible to get people to agree on everything. Right. We've got our Breeze Q style, and that themes certain things, and then we've got Kirigami, which we worked very hard to look like Breeze, and then we have like another project that's sort of an offshoot of Kirigami that's called Kirigami Add-ons, which has a lot of really great UI components for use in building apps, but they kind of look a little bit different. They don't look bad, but they look different. And that's because the people involved in that project think this is the way a UI should be made.
I see.
I see people criticizing Microsoft a lot for a lack of UI consistency. And they say, oh my gosh, it's like there are 10 different teams designing things in different ways. Well, in a big organization without a top-down leader to beat people with a stick, I think it's kind of impossible not to have that. And so in KDE, we have different people and different teams who have different UI philosophies. And what if none of them are wrong? Right. What if all of these are good in a certain way, in a certain context, and there's just kind of a messy internal process of getting people on board and convincing people that one is better and that one is better. Maybe we want to move on to this one and that one. And that's what happens when you have a bunch of highly intelligent and capable free software hackers who have different ideas about what UI style is best, right? That's why you open Dolphin settings window and it looks one way. And you open NeoChat settings window and it's got like cards in it, right? Which one's better? Is one better? I mean, it's a source of inconsistency, but I struggle to really say that one is better. And we just don't have like 100% consensus on going all in with one or going all in with the other one yet. It's just one of those things that I think reveals that it's a community and not a company.
Right.
There's no boss that says, make it look like this or you're fired. Instead, there are people who said, well, I think this looks better. Other people said, well, I think the status quo works better. And we're just going to have to figure out something on a mutual basis if we want that to be 100% consistent. And maybe even in this state, we're already better than Apple and Microsoft and Google.